Time now for business. Solange Moujon is here with us. Emmanuel Macron, Solange, has laid out some plans for the French presidency of the European Union on Thursday. One measure he discussed was a minimum wage for all EU nations.
Yeah, Macron said he would back a current push for a minimum wage legislation. This comes as the EU Parliament is ready to start negotiations on how to ensure that base salaries do actually provide a decent standard of living across the Union. Now, Macron hopes that he can get the bill through a parliamentary vote before France's presidential elections in April. And Selena Sykes has more on the challenges of putting such guidelines into place.
In the corridors in Brussels, the idea of a European minimum wage has long been a bone of contention. France is now preparing to carry the baton for what many consider a difficult task. There are huge salary differences across the bloc. Minimum wage is €332 in Bulgaria. In France, it's almost 5 times more, while Luxembourg tops the charts with €2,200 per month. One thing is certain, fixing the same minimum wage for all members is off the table.
Vous ne pouvez pas décréter demain ou même dans 3 ans, les salaires minimums en Europe sont partout les mêmes. Ça, ce n'est économiquement, mais même socialement impossible. Ce qu'il faut, c'est de la convergence vers le haut.
There are two camps against increasing the lowest salaries. Firstly, the 6 member states where there is no minimum wage fixed by the government. In these countries, negotiations between employers and trade unions set pay rates. High-wage Nordic countries argue guidelines from Brussels could ultimately lead to lower wages. Meanwhile, Hungary, Bulgaria and Romania, where the minimum wage is less than €500, don't want salaries to increase too quickly.
Certains pays jouent de cette compétitivité d'avoir des salaires plus bas et donc c'est très difficile de demander à ces entreprises d'augmenter le salaire d'un seul coup de 30, 40, 50 ou même plus % pour rattraper le reste de l'Union européenne.
For now, the most likely outcome is an agreement that minimum wages should be 60% of the average salary in each member state. The idea is that people can make ends meet even on low salaries. Though with opposition from several sides, the result could be a more watered-down agreement.
Well, it's last day of the trading week. Solange, how are European markets doing today?
Well, after a weak lead by Wall Street overnight and then the Asian markets earlier today, the European markets have also been somewhat subdued today. They started out in the red, but now at midday they are pretty flat. And because of COVID, but also because investors are waiting for the U.S.'s consumer price data report. It will be released later today, and it is expected to show that inflation is at its highest point in the United States since the 1980s. So the markets are largely in a wait-and-see mode today.
Yeah, since the 1980s. This reminds me of something we might have seen back in the past. This next story out of the United States. A bit of a surprise, a symbolic labor victory at a Starbucks branch.
Yeah, for the first time ever in its half-century of existence, a Starbucks branch has been unionized. Employees of a Buffalo, New York Starbucks, they voted to unionize after many attempts by management to keep them from doing so. Now, the coffee giant has downplayed the effect of the unionization, but other branches could indeed follow Buffalo's lead. Already 4 stores have followed suit in making moves to do the same thing.
We just started a movement. This is the most incredible feeling in the whole entire world, to go through what we've done and then be victorious, which we are now with the first unionized Starbucks store in the United States. Feels like we're on top of the world.
Now, here in France, over 100,000 people were hired in the 3rd trimester of the year, according to l'INSEE. And many of the jobs were in the service sector. But vacancies remain a major problem, especially in low-paying temp jobs that have popped up over this holiday season. Selena Sykes has more.
Toy stores, supermarkets and homeware stores all desperately on the hunt for workers. This shop is recruiting for employees to stock shelves, help customers and man the tills. On minimum wage, earning around €1,500 net per month, Guillaume is one of the new recruits and works nearly around the clock.
I'm on 42 hours, that means 6 days a week. I only have Sundays off, so it's a lot of work. But you know that's going to be the case when you're working for a toy store at the end of the year.
With the Christmas rush well underway, there are still 40 jobs to fill. A trend not only seen in France. Employers in the consumer goods industry in the US and the UK are also struggling to recruit, with increasing numbers of people voluntarily quitting jobs and demanding better pay and flexibility. This combined with a sharp increase in demand as economies reopen after COVID lockdowns has created shortages. Supermarkets are also affected. They often call on temp agencies. At this one in the Paris region, there are currently more than 100 jobs advertised. According to this recruiter, more and more workers are opting for jobs with online sellers.
Working in a supermarket often means antisocial hours and cold conditions. Working for e-commerce usually means more stable hours, and employees work in normal temperatures, so the conditions aren't the same.
The consumer goods industry is France's biggest employer, with more than 3 million employees. More than 100,000 people were hired in France this trimester, but many vacancies are still open.
And finally, a tidbit for some of us Harry Potter fans out there, but maybe some of us don't have pockets that are deep enough for this story.
Exactly. A first edition of J.K. Rowling's children's book has sold for, get this, a whopping $471,000. This is actually a world record for a piece of 20th century literature, and it was 6 times the starting price at auction. But before you head to your bookshelves to see if you own one of these valuable editions, know that there are only 500 copies of this specific binding of Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone that were printed. I, for one, know that I do not have one of such copies. Mine is a paperback that's tattered.
And sadly, this one was published only in the Britain. I did the math. It breaks down to about $6 for every word in the book.
Wow. All right. Very smart of you there.
All right. Thank you very much, Solange. Solange Moujon with a roundup of what's making business news.